name's Mike Archer. I'm the owner and founder of Axe Recovery, and I've been sober 16 years on the 17th actually of October. Today's the 19th, right? So it was 16 years ago in 2 days. I'd always had a problem with. I was a child of the '70s, so we did everything. We did acid, we did every drug. That's what was going on in the '70s. It was pretty common for people to do that. Of course, I was in that culture, and so as I got older, I always drank. Always had a drinking thing. There was a time in 1989 I quit drinking and quit drugging and just stopped and started doing other things like martial arts, flying airplanes, just doing ego-based activities to change how I felt, and that worked for a while. It worked for about 12 years. So from '89 to 2000 and I think two. And then I decided one day that, well, here's what actually happened. I'm a martial arts. I was doing martial arts and I hurt my neck in a demonstration. I landed on my head and kind of tweaked my neck. So I went to the doctor. Doctor prescribed me Vicodin, which is a strong, opioid painkiller. And I started taking those. I liked them, and then of course, they wouldn't give me enough of them. So I started finding them other places and buy them on the street. And then after a while, I started drinking too, because if you ever did, eventually you run out of drugs. And then you have to deal with this. If you're doing opioids, you get sick. Anybody that does opiates knows what I'm talking about. And so I started drinking to take the edge off of that. And so then I'm drinking and doing opiates. So I'm washing down, opiates with, whiskey, basically beer, whatever. And it got out of hand. So in 2003, I had a wreck in the middle of the day when I was intoxicated, and that got me in the justice system, and in Williamson County of all places. And so I wound up on probation for 22 months. I could have gone to jail. A person got hurt in the wreck. And so anyhow, I stayed sober. I stayed dry for a year. So I went to AA. My brother had been sober at that point. My brother had been sober about 20-something years, and he took me to an AA meeting, and I got started in AA. And I stayed sober for about a year, and then I went on a trip to see my grandkid in Florida. And there was a layover in Memphis, and not working a real program, of course, because I was just doing 1, 2, 3. I was at step 3. I never got a sponsor or any of that. And I was in Memphis, and I was going between gates, to change planes, and I thought, I'm nowhere. My alcoholic mind says I'm in no man's land. So I just went to the bar and started drinking in the airport. And then anyway, so that started back. So that was in 2004, and so that was another year of that same thing. So went right back like I never stopped. And it came to a head in 2005. I realized I was having blackouts, and because I wouldn't remember things. And there was an incident that occurred. I won't go into it. That I actually saw myself in a blackout on a video, and it wasn't good. So I realized then I could be, I've never struck any of my family, but I realized that I wouldn't know what I was doing, and it scared me. So I went to treatment right away. I went to Austin Recovery Center, which the reason I went there is because I could afford it. My insurance wouldn't pay for recovery, and it was out of pocket, and it was about $6,000, which is cheap, and for detox and treatment. I think detox was another $1,000, but regardless, it was money well spent. So that was October 17th of 2005. And I went in there, and never had been in treatment. It was my first trip to treatment. I'd been through AA. I'd relapsed a couple of times to, the old-fashioned way. Because back in the day, there was no treatment centers. Back in Bill Wilson's day, the guy who started AA. But anyway, so I went to treatment there, went to detox. That was rough. I didn't realize how sick I was. And then when I went to the actual treatment center, and I met a lot of people there. I went through 30 days there, and it was great. And I made a lot of friends and a lot of guys that were going. So while I was there, everyone was asking, "What are you going to do when you get out?" And this guy would say, "I'm going to go to a sober house." I was like, "Well, me too. I'm going to my house. My house is sober." He says, "No, you understand. It's a sober house. It's got structure. It's got they do drug testing. They have rules. They have curfews. They have, you can't drink or drug, and it's a, it's structured living. That sounds pretty cool. So anyway, so we got out. I went home to my house, of course. I had my own house, and I had my wife and kids there. And I went home, and then I would go. About half the people or less than half the people have vehicles after they get out of treatment. Most people don't. And so I would give people, so I would give guys a ride. I would pick up my friends and take them to meetings. We'd go to a meeting every day. And I would go to the sober houses and pick them up. And I'd go in there and see the houses. And I'm like, man, I wasn't impressed. And so I thought, well, if I can stay sober a couple of years, maybe I talked to some people about it, kind of had an idea what was going on. So I said, well, if I stay sober 2 years, I'll buy a house myself and start doing this. And maybe, and so over the time I learned that, I learned more about it and kind of how they were run, but there was really there was no training. You had to figure it out on your own. So I just did a trial and error, and I just did it by the book, what works and what doesn't work. I got some ideas from the Oxford houses, from their rule book and some things like that, and just put it together, and my wife and I did it. And we bought this house we're in right now. We bought this house in 2000, and right at the end of 2007, right around Christmas is when we opened this house in 2007. And anyway, so we started, and with the philosophy being, would I live here if I had to? That was the whole driving factor. Because there's a couple of things I believe. I believe in the 12 steps, but I believe that you have to do them just like they say. You do 1 through 12. You can't skip one, and you can't. And you have to find a sponsor, and you need to work. You need to work your program. If you can go to a meeting for the first 3 years of sobriety, I went to a meeting every day. So I spoke to my sponsor 2 or 3 times a week. And I think you need to rush through the steps. I don't think there's any reason to screw around with them. I think you should be a race till the old you comes back and takes you back out there. And anyhow, so we started the house. I ran on that philosophy, and we don't do bunks. We don't, we've had a bunk bed once in a while, but no one's ever been in it. And but we don't do bunk beds. I don't do things that I don't want to do. So if I don't want to climb up in a bunk bed, I don't expect you to. If I don't, I want to live in filth, I don't expect you to. And the rules are built around that. And I expect people to own up to their what they're supposed to do. I expect them to know the rules, and I expect them to follow them. We don't have a ton of crazy rules. We don't. Our rules are all based on things I've learned. Actually, in the process of doing it, it's just not stuff I do to exercise power. I'm not, when we step back to the first step, I'm powerless. I'm powerless over everything in general, except my attitude. So that being said, that's what people, no one's in control. Here's the rule book, you follow the rules and everything will be fine. You're not the boss. You're not working for anybody here. You're working for yourself, and we're working as a community together to get well together. And if you want to be in there, it's a volunteer army. Just like AA and NA, it's a volunteer army. You want to be here, you can. If you don't want to be here, hey, you don't have to be. We'd rather you not be if you don't want to be. So that being said, that's pretty much the story. Over the last 16 years, I've had surgeries. I've had health issues, of course, like anybody else. You're getting older, and and I'm still just stuck to the to the program, and it's everything's worked out. So, and I hope it will continue with the grace of God. I can stay sober today, and that's my story.